So the NFL's new rule that they put into place about kneeling during the anthem was met with a lot of different responses. I know, at least in my journalism class, people were saying that the typical argument about how the military is going to get all dishonored by having kneel. But what do you think? What do you think about it?
I just feel like the dishonoring of military is such a it's it's a hijacking of the conversation. So we'll talk about the dishonoring of the military in the terms of that. Primarily, African American males taking knees during football games is disrespectful. But we won't talk about the conversation they're trying to have. To get us somewhat away from that point, we won't talk about the constant disrespect of just military members in general. We live here in the high desert. There's a homeless military man on every corner.
Oh yeah.
So if we want to start dealing with respecting military, let's start there. But back to the point of, it's just a way to hijack the conversation, I think. And we spent more time the last year talking about policies to keep players from kneeling, and not policies to keep police brutality from happening. Mm-hmm. And so that's just where I stand on it.
I think this morning I saw on Facebook a post about a couple of reporters that were doing a piece about it. And one of the things they said that I thought was interesting, and I don't know if it's technically true, I didn't think about it too much, was that if this same argument had happened, say 5-10 years ago with a different president like Obama or Bush or Clinton or anything in the past, they don't think that it would have gone in the same direction. They think that, in their opinion, that Trump is making this kind of his political agenda to make him more favorable to, say, the military background, because that's what people were going for before he even said anything, was dishonoring the military. And one of the things that they brought up in the video to combat that is that when the Constitution was made and people saying you're going against the country and stuff, like, people wear the flag on, like, Speedos as, like, a bandana on your head. They, like, carry it around for sports events, and they're like, in the Constitution, nowhere does it say that you should stand for the flag. I mean, like, that's true, and I get that point of view, but I think one of the things that I've heard a lot of is, like I said, people saying that, people die for the flag, and I kind of feel that although that may be true for some people, the majority of people are fighting for the country, and if the country is represented by one flag, which was, as you know, founded and made during war times, it just seems like if we're going to say the flag is war, then the country is war, and that just seems a little off-putting to me, saying that Americans are all about war, which we may be, but it just seems like if we want to combat the things, like you said, police brutality and other things, we should say that we're not more about violence, that we're for, like, supporting people like this that want to protest and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to the political side of Trump, I don't know. I think it's natural. I think this is kind of the low-hanging fruit for him. The NFL being the most popular league in America, probably just the most popular form of entertainment in America. He sees an opportunity to kind of bring attention to himself, as we all know. He's pretty good at that. And without getting too political, he hasn't delivered on a lot of the things he's promised to the people who voted for him. And so this is kind of a way to start a rally cry, so to speak, maybe divert the conversation from what he hasn't gotten done, and more so toward this. And, yesterday I was reading about the comments when he kind of insinuated that he didn't feel like the NFL went far enough, and even intimated that if you didn't stand for the flag, you should be kicked out of the country, which is insane. As an American, we should all be offended by that, in my opinion. That's the very basis of who we don't want to be. We don't want to have military parades and forced expressions of freedoms and things of that nature. Like, we're not... The things he says to me come across as very dictatorship, which is supposed to be the complete opposite of America. But I digress. Back to the kneeling. I think there's also truth in... under different presidents, this wouldn't have been an issue. They perhaps would have been more focused on other things. And it's constitutionally, it's pretty cut and dry, right? Like, this isn't an issue. Mm-hmm. This isn't an issue. So the debate is more of a personal preference that is layered in so many ways beyond just the act of kneeling. Racism, socialism, all of these things come into play here, and trying to layer it and figure out which is which makes it really difficult. Which is why I'd rather just keep the conversation on how can we impact change.
Yeah.
Frankly, the most American thing someone can do is stand up to America and tell America that, hey, we need to get our stuff together to be better Americans. So whether or not you agree with the players kneeling, whether or not you even, well, I guess agree is the only word I can really come up with, you should listen. Mm-hmm. And that's what being American should be. But to your last point, which I thought was probably the most amazing in a way when you really think about it, is I think in America we are war. Mm-hmm. That's what we represent. We're always in war with each other, with other countries. We're in a constant fight, and I don't think we've gotten to a spot as a society where we can kind of let our guard down in that regard. And it's interesting. I love history. As you know, I love history. And so where we sit right now as a country in the time, we're at a very critical time that's going to determine do we go? Do we advance further? Or do we kind of become like the lost Roman empires that perhaps grew too fast and too arrogant and lost its way? Mm-hmm. It's all very interesting to me.
Yeah, I think that no matter where someone stands on the dealing point, I think the point that everyone can kind of agree on is that no matter if you think that they're allowed to kneel or not, I think the bigger picture is that we shouldn't be taking away the right for them to be able to protest in whatever way possible. And I think it was kind of good in a way that the NFL at least said in the rule that if they want to protest, they could still go to the locker room, because I think it would be a totally different conversation if they just totally said all players are required to stand on the field and stand with everyone, because that would have just, as you know, would have led to much more conflicting arguments. But I think, many of the NFL owners and even Roger Goodell stood with the players when they decided to go in their direction. But I think they just kind of took the political way out in saying, well, you're going to give the players the option, but to make the president and the rest of America that believes so strongly about that happy, that the best way to do it was telling them they have to stay, but they can also go to the locker room. And as we know, making them go to the locker room doesn't mean they're not going to be seen. I mean, someone's going to be there. There's always going to be a press in the locker room that is going to take a picture or something of, the 10 people still standing in the locker room on the first day of the NFL season. I bet you there's going to be at least half the teams in the NFL that have at least one or two players in the locker room that's going to be either in a picture or a video on some news outlet saying about how they have, they're standing in the locker room on the first day, kind of, so to speak, because as Americans we like to individualize ourselves, but at the same time make it known that our points are our points. And I think that the rule change was a little bit of a way to say, this is how politics can affect things, but at the same way, the NFL is also saying that, hey, we're at least acknowledging that the players are still here and not just the politics of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And money. Let's be real honest about this all. Mm-hmm. This is a money move. The NFL didn't want to upset its players too much. It didn't want to upset politics and sponsors too much. And they tried to find a middle ground. Now, what's interesting to me is I almost feel like they've made this an issue again when most of us haven't talked about it in months. We've kind of forgotten about it. Yeah, it was going to come up again when the season started, but it was going to become kind of a normal sense. And we've all kind of accepted that it's a part of it, but more importantly, the players are doing the work behind it. They're not just kneeling. They're also starting the conversations and following up with actions. But I agree that I think while they tried to kind of appease both sides, as we all know, you can't appease both sides. Mm-hmm. It's one or the other. So what happens when, I don't know, is it 53 guys on an NFL roster? What happens when 52 guys come out and one guy stays in the locker room? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing as that one guy kneeling. We're all going to say, man, where's that one guy? We're all going to start making assumptions about why he isn't there and why he wasn't there. And he's going to have to answer those same questions, and it's going to be the same story. Mm-hmm. Visually, the optics, I guess it's better. You don't see them kneeling, but it's the same thing. And I just didn't agree with the policy, A, in that the players weren't informed of the decision to make it, but in B, that I'm kind of just, if you're going to do this, then do it. Go all the way. The NBA, which I love, enforces and makes their players stand. It's just the rule. They don't argue it, they don't fight it, but the NBA also empowers its players to speak out and do things. So there were ways I thought the NFL could have better handled this. They could have became partners with the players, found a middle ground to appease the players and appease politics. Instead, they tried to split hairs, and I feel like it's just going to give us more of what we already have.
Yeah, and I know I was brought to my attention that the NFLPA was actually looking into an association between the rule change and how it could potentially have gone against the rules itself of the NFL to see if somehow they could flip the policy back to where it was so that its players can go. Because as you know, the rule change was made in the NFL owners meeting, and NFLPA wasn't there. No other players were there or anything like that. They were even given the opportunity to voice their opinions. So in that regard, it's kind of subtracting from the point of they're giving more freedom when they even allow the Players Association, which is there to represent all of the players, to even at least have like one of its constituents be there and at least give their opinion about it or say something before it got into action. But to just say that the owners, people that are there, like you said, simply for money, to go and make these decisions that are going to bring them more revenue now that they're going to appease more of the general public, just seems like a bigger issue to talk about. And of course that's a completely different conversation to have about how money drives things in America. But yeah, I think just overall the kneeling rule that was put into place this week was more detrimental to the players in a sense that want to speak out, because like you said, they'll be more in the spotlight now. They won't be on the field. They'll be in the locker room where everyone's going to just guess what they're doing instead of actually knowing. But at the same time, it helped the NFL owners and the NFL itself get in a more politically correct situation with the president and everyone else that believes that the kneeling is negative morale for the country, so to speak.
Absolutely, man, and it's I'm interested to see how this plays out. Obviously, since Trump has become president, again, don't want to get too political, but we get a lot more of these circumstances where we find ourselves kind of questioning not just morality, but kind of what's our constitutional rights versus what's actually right. Mm-hmm. And it's a constant debate that we seem to have as a country. And the NFL, I guess, is a great test subject to see how this all plays out. But what I hope comes from it, and what I hope the players remember, and most of them seem to, is that at the end of the day, it's about their actions, not just the action of kneeling or protesting the anthem, but their overall actions in their communities and their homes, being good people and good role models. And so far, from what I know, they have been. Mm-hmm. And we can go there. To that, though, kind of to backtrack, I thought I was done, but then something else came to mind. I would like to see the NFL take this moral high ground on things such as violence, mm-hmm. Alcoholism, drug use. It's crazy that guys catch more flack for taking a knee to try to make something good than they do for beating their girlfriends. Oh, yeah. And that's a whole nother topic, and we got plenty, and we're going to talk about that stuff later. As far as violence against women. But the fact that we live in a world, or the NFL lives in a society, well, I guess the rest of us do too, where we're so accepting of men who beat women, but we're not accepting of black men who say, wait a second, can we stop killing us? We have some soul searching to do.
Yeah. But I feel like we've hit everything that we need to hit about the kneeling, and maybe it's time for us to move into those type of topics.
Yeah, we can do that.